Get ready to dive into a world where enduring bonds were forged not in romance, but in remarkable friendships. These are tales of famous historical figures who, while navigating life largely as singles, found profound, lasting connections with kindred spirits. Imagine a world-famous author whose most intimate thoughts were known only to her unmarried sister, a sister who would later curate her entire legacy by selectively burning letters. Picture a genius of the Renaissance, a man who never married, entrusting his life's revolutionary work, thousands of pages of notes and drawings, not to family, but to his devoted young apprentice and companion. We will journey through time to uncover the stories of a celebrated American novelist, himself a lifelong bachelor, and his complex, deeply intellectual friendship with a fellow unmarried writer, a bond that would span continents and end in heartbreaking tragedy. We will step into the hallowed halls of 18th century England to witness two literary titans, both bachelors whose schoolboy pacts and dramatic European tour arguments ultimately cemented a friendship that would significantly shape English literature. Then we will glimpse behind the velvet curtain of old Hollywood, where a famously reclusive and unmarried screen goddess shared a secret, decades-long correspondence filled with intense emotion with another unconventional, often single, female writer. These letters were only revealed to the world 10 years after the star's death. And we will travel to Victorian England, where the most iconic nurse in history, a woman who chose her calling over marriage, found crucial support and understanding in a decades-long friendship with a free-spirited, older mentor. These are not just stories of friendship. They are chronicles of loyalty, intellectual partnerships, and deep emotional support systems that thrived outside conventional norms, often because these individuals were single, allowing for unique and powerful connection. These friendships, filled with specific dates, documented facts, and illuminating insights, offer a different look at history's great names. Number 6. Florence Nightingale and Mary Clarke, Mohl, a bond forged in rebellion and intellect. Florence Nightingale, born May 12, 1820, would become a name synonymous with nursing and healthcare reform. She famously chose a life of service over marriage and societal expectations, a radical decision for a woman of her upper-class British background in the 19th century. Her path was often lonely, marked by struggles against family opposition and the rigid conventions of the time. Yet a significant source of strength and understanding came from her enduring friendship with Mary Clarke Mohl, a woman 27 years her senior. Mary Clarke, or Clarke as she was affectionately known, was born in 1793. She was a vibrant, unconventional figure, known for her wit, intelligence, and independent spirit. Their paths first crossed in the winter of 1837–1838 in Rome, Italy. Florence, then a young woman of 17, was on a European tour with her family, a standard part of a gentlewoman's education. Mary Clarke, already in her mid-40s, was a seasoned traveler and an established figure in intellectual circles. This meeting marked the beginning of a friendship that would span more than 4 decades, until Mary's death in 1883. From their initial encounters, Florence was captivated by Mary Clarke's intellectual vivacity and her disdain for the restrictive social norms that Florence herself found so stifling. Mary, in turn, recognized the extraordinary intellect and passionate nature of the young Florence. Their correspondence began almost immediately, and letters became a vital lifeline, especially for Florence, who felt increasingly isolated within her own family as her desire to pursue nursing, then considered a lowly profession, grew stronger. Mary Clarke provided Florence with an intellectual and emotional outlet that was otherwise unavailable to her. While Florence's family, particularly her mother Fanny and sister Parthenope, pressured her towards marriage and a conventional domestic life, Mary encouraged Florence's intellectual pursuits and her yearning for a meaningful existence. Mary herself was a model of female independence. For many years, she maintained her own apartment in Paris, even before her marriage, and was a respected figure in her own right. In 1847, Mary Clarke married Julius Mohl, a distinguished German-born Orientalist and scholar. She was 54 years old at the time. Her marriage did not diminish her friendship with Florence. If anything, their home in Paris at 120 Rue du Bac became a cherished refuge for Nightingale, Madame Mohl, as she became hosted a renowned Parisian salon, a gathering place for leading writers, artists, politicians, and thinkers from across Europe. Figures like Ivan Turgenev, the Brownings, and various French intellectuals frequented her salon. When Florence visited, she was exposed to a stimulating environment of ideas and debate, a stark contrast to the often stifling atmosphere of her family home. These visits provided her with intellectual nourishment and reinforced her determination to carve her own path. The letters exchanged between Florence and Mary over the years reveal the depth and complexity of their bond. Mary's letters were often filled with sharp wit, worldly advice, and unwavering support for Florence's ambitions, even when those ambitions seemed radical or unattainable. She understood Florence's frustrations with her family and the societal constraints placed upon women. In one letter, Mary famously advised Florence to live your life and not to succumb to the pressures of others. This encouragement was invaluable to Florence, who often felt misunderstood and alone in her convictions. During the period when Florence was intensely struggling to break free from her family and find a way to train as a nurse, Mary Clarke was a consistent ally. She did not always agree with Florence's methods or her sometimes obsessive focus, but she never wavered in her belief in Florence's capabilities and the importance of her mission. When Florence finally defied her family and went to Kaiserswerth in Germany in 1851 for nursing training, Mary supported her decision. Crimean War, which began in 1853, catapulted Florence Nightingale to international fame. Her work in Scutari, reforming the horrific conditions in military hospitals and drastically reducing mortality rates, became legendary. Even during this intense period, her connection with Mary Clarke endured. Mary followed Florence's progress with keen interest and pride, and their correspondence continued, though less frequently due to the demands of Florence's work. After the Crimea, Florence returned to England the national hero, but also physically and emotionally exhausted. She largely withdrew from public life, preferring to work tirelessly behind the scenes on healthcare reform. During these years of intense, often solitary work, her friendship with Mary Clarke remained a constant. Mary, from her vantage point in Paris, continued to offer encouragement, news of the wider world, and a perspective that helped Florence maintain her connections beyond her immediate concerns. Mary's salon provided a link to the intellectual currents of Europe, and her letters kept Florence informed and engaged. One significant insight into their friendship is how it represented a bridge between generations and differing approaches to female emancipation. Mary Clarke, while unconventional, operated within a more social framework, using her salon and wit to influence and engage. Florence Nightingale, on the other hand, pursued a more focused, almost monastic dedication to her work. Yet they found common ground in their shared desire for women to lead meaningful, intellectually fulfilling lives. Mary's support was not just emotional, it was also practical. She used her network and influence to help Florence whenever possible. Their friendship was not without its complexities. There were periods of strain, often stemming from Florence's intense focus and her sometimes demanding nature, or Mary's frankness. However, the underlying affection and mutual respect always brought them back together. Mary Clarke Mohl died in Paris on May 15, 1883, at the age of 90. Florence Nightingale outlived her friend by 27 years, passing away on August 13, 1910. The loss of Mary was a significant one for Florence. For over 40 years, Mary had been a confidant, a mentor, and a steadfast supporter. A unique figure in Florence's life, who understood both her struggles and her triumphs. Their enduring bond highlights the profound impact that a supportive, intellectually vibrant friendship could have on a historical figure who chose to remain single and dedicate her life to a singular, world-changing mission. Connection helped sustain Florence Nightingale through some of her most challenging years, reinforcing her resolve in a world that often sought to confine her. Number 5. Greta, Garbo, and Mercedes de Acosta, a Hollywood enigma's secretive bond. Greta Garbo, born Greta Lovisa Gustafsson on September 18, 1905, in Stockholm, Sweden, remains one of Hollywood's most iconic and mysterious stars. She was famed for her haunting beauty, her talent, and her intense desire for privacy, famously declaring, "I want to be alone." Garbo never married, and after retiring from filmmaking at the age of 36 in 1941, lived a reclusive life until her death on April 15, 1990. Mercedes de Acosta, born in New York City on March 1, 1892, was a poet, playwright, and screenwriter known for her flamboyant personality and her relationships with many prominent women. Though de Acosta was married once to painter Abram Poole from 1920 to 1935, her primary emotional and romantic attachments were with women. Paths of these two contrasting personalities, the reclusive Garbo and the outgoing de Acosta, first crossed in Hollywood in 1931. De Acosta was introduced to Garbo by the actress Lillian Tashman. This meeting sparked an intense connection that would last in various forms for nearly 30 years. Their relationship was characterized by periods of great closeness and passion, intertwined with phases of distance and Garbo's famous elusiveness. In the early 1930s, their bond deepened significantly. They spent considerable time together, including a 6-week period in 1931 when they vacationed on Silver Slipper, a small island in the Sierra Nevada mountains. During this time, de Acosta documented moments of idyllic companionship. Their connection was clearly profound, though its exact nature, particularly from Garbo's intensely private perspective, remained guarded. De Acosta, on the other hand, was more open about her affections. The evidence of their enduring friendship and love primarily comes from Mercedes de Acosta herself, particularly through her 1960 autobiography, Here Lies the Heart, and through their extensive correspondence. The Rosenbach Museum and Library in Philadelphia holds 181 items of correspondence from Garbo to de Acosta, including letters, cards, and telegrams. These were made public in the year 2000, 10 years after Garbo's death, as per de Acosta's instructions. The letters reveal a spectrum of emotions, from deep affection and longing to Garbo's characteristic anxieties and need for solitude. Garbo's letters often express a genuine fondness and reliance on de Acosta. She used affectionate nicknames for Mercedes and wrote of missing her company. For example, in one letter from the early 1930s, Garbo wrote about how much she longed for Mercedes' presence. However, Garbo's fear of exposure and her inherently reserved nature meant that she often pulled away, leaving de Acosta in a state of uncertainty. This push and pull dynamic became a recurring theme in their relationship. Their friendship unfolded against the backdrop of Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s, a place where unconventional relationships, particularly same-sex ones, had to be conducted with extreme discretion to avoid scandal and career ruin. Garbo was intensely aware of this, and her need for privacy was paramount. This undoubtedly contributed to the complexities and often the secrecy surrounding her bond with de Acosta. Mercedes de Acosta was a persistent and devoted friend, sometimes to Garbo's perceived annoyance. She often sent Garbo gifts, letters, and poems. While Garbo seemed to appreciate the affection at times, she could also be distant and unresponsive, a pattern noted by many who knew her. Acosta, for her part, seemed to accept Garbo's terms, cherishing the moments of closeness they did share. The publication of Mercedes Acosta's autobiography, Here Lies the Heart, in 1960, caused a significant rift. While Acosta wrote about her relationships with various famous women, including Marlene Dietrich and Isadora Duncan, her passages about Garbo, though perhaps not as explicit as some feared, were still seen by Garbo as a betrayal of her privacy. Garbo, who valued her seclusion above almost all else, reportedly never forgave Acosta for this public discussion of their private lives. After the book's publication, their direct contact ceased, though Acosta continued to express her affection for Garbo. Despite the eventual estrangement caused by the autobiography, the nearly 3 decades of connection prior to this event represent a significant and enduring bond. For Garbo, who remained single throughout her life and cultivated an image of solitary independence, her relationship with Acosta was one of the most intense and long-lasting in her adult life. It provided her with a form of companionship and emotional intimacy that she seemed to find difficult to sustain with others. An insight into their friendship is how it highlights the challenges faced by individuals in the public eye, particularly women who sought to live outside conventional romantic and social structures during that era. Garbo's single status was part of her mystique, but it also meant that her personal relationships were subject to intense speculation. Her bond with Acosta, passionate and complex, was a significant part of her private world, a world she fought fiercely to protect. Mercedes Acosta passed away on May 9, 1968. Garbo lived for another 22 years, remaining largely a recluse in New York City. The letters, when finally opened, offered a rare glimpse into the private emotions of a woman who was a global icon of mystery. They confirmed the depth of feeling between the two women, showing moments of vulnerability and tenderness from Garbo that contrasted sharply with her public persona. For instance, some letters detailed Garbo's anxieties about her career and her looks, concerns she shared with Acosta. The friendship between Greta Garbo and Mercedes Acosta, while tumultuous and ultimately strained, endured in its own unique way for a very long time. It was a connection between two profoundly different women, one a global superstar who craved solitude, the other an outgoing writer who thrived on connection. Both, in their own ways, navigated life as singles in the traditional sense for significant periods, Garbo for her entire adult life. Their story offers a fascinating look at the nature of love, friendship, and the pursuit of personal truth in the face of public scrutiny and societal expectations. The enduring power of their connection is evidenced by the sheer volume of correspondence in the decades it spanned, a testament to a bond that, despite its complexities, left an indelible mark on both their lives. Number 4. Horace Walpole and Thomas Gray, an enduring literary friendship forged at Eton. Horace Walpole, born on September 24, 1717, was an influential English writer, art historian, and Whig politician. He is best known for his Gothic novel, The Castle of Otranto, and for Strawberry Hill House, his fantastical Gothic revival villa. Walpole never married and remained a bachelor throughout his life, cultivating a wide circle of friends and correspondents. Thomas Gray, born on December 26, 1716, was a poet, classical scholar, and Cambridge professor. He is famed for his elegy written in a country churchyard, one of the most celebrated poems in the English language. Gray also never married, living a quiet, scholarly life. The enduring friendship between these two literary figures began in their youth at Eton College around the year 1727. They were part of a close-knit group of intellectually inclined students that called themselves the Quadruple Alliance. This alliance consisted of Walpole, Gray, Thomas Ashton, who later became a clergyman, and Richard West, a promising poet who died young in 1742. This early bond, forged in shared studies and youthful aspirations, laid the foundation for a connection that would last, with one significant interruption, for over 4 decades until Grey's death. After Eton, both Walpole and Grey attended Cambridge University, though at different colleges, Walpole at King's College and Grey at Peterhouse. Their friendship continued, and in 1739 they embarked on a grand tour of Europe together, a common practice for young men of their social standing. This tour, intended to broaden their cultural horizons, lasted for over 2 years, taking them through France and Italy. They visited cities like Paris, Florence, Rome, and Naples. Initially, the tour proceeded well, with both men sharing their observations and experiences. Walpole, with his aristocratic connections and outgoing nature, often took the lead in social engagements, while the more reserved and scholarly Grey focused on antiquities and art. However, by 1741, tensions developed between them. The exact cause of their quarrel, which occurred in Reggio, Italy, is not entirely clear, but it seems to have stemmed from differences in temperament and expectations. Walpole later admitted that he had been too overbearing and perhaps too focused on fashionable society, while Grey may have felt neglected or that his more scholarly interests were not being respected. The disagreement was serious enough that they parted ways and returned to England separately. This marked the beginning of a period of estrangement that lasted for about 3 years. The death of their mutual friend Richard West in June 1742 seems to have played a role in their eventual reconciliation. Both men were deeply affected by West's passing. By 1744, through the efforts of mutual acquaintances, Walpole and Grey re-established contact. Their friendship, once rekindled, proved to be mature and lasting. Though perhaps never regaining the easy intimacy of their youth, they recognized their different personalities but shared a deep mutual respect for each other's intellectual and literary talents. Walpole became a significant champion of Grey's work. In 1757, Walpole established a private press at his home, Strawberry Hill. One of the first works he published there was Odes by Mr. Grey, which included 2 of Grey's most famous poems, The Progress of Poesy and The Bard. This publication helped to solidify Grey's reputation as a leading poet of his time. Grey was notoriously meticulous and reluctant to publish, and Walpole's encouragement and practical support were crucial in bringing his poetry to a wider audience. Grey's elegy, written in a country churchyard, first published in 1751, had already achieved immense popularity, and Walpole's efforts further cemented his friend's literary standing. Their correspondence, which resumed after their reconciliation, reveals an ongoing intellectual exchange. They discussed literature, politics, and mutual acquaintances. Walpole often sought Grey's opinion on his own writings and projects, including The Castle of Otranto. Grey, though sometimes critical, offered thoughtful and constructive feedback. Despite their different lifestyles, Walpole being a man of society and politics, Grey a reclusive academic, they found common ground in their shared love of learning and letters. An insight into their friendship is how it demonstrates the capacity for intellectual bonds to overcome personal differences and youthful conflicts. Both men, as lifelong bachelors, may have found a particular kind of companionship in their shared literary pursuits and long history. Their friendship was not one of constant daily interaction, especially as Grey preferred the seclusion of Cambridge. However, it was a steady presence in both their lives, marked by mutual esteem and support. Grey spent much of his later life at Cambridge, where he was appointed Professor of Modern History in 1768, though he never delivered an inaugural lecture. Continued to write poetry, though sparingly, and pursued his scholarly interests in literature, history, and natural science. Walpole, meanwhile, was active in Parliament for many years and continued to expand Strawberry Hill, filling it with his vast collection of art and curiosities. He also maintained an extensive correspondence that provides a vivid picture of 18th century English society and culture. Thomas Gray died on July 30th, 1771, at the age of 54, in Cambridge. Walpole was deeply saddened by his friend's death. He wrote a short memoir of Gray and took on the responsibility of editing some of Gray's unpublished works and letters, which were published in 1775 by William Mason, another friend of Gray. Walpole's efforts helped to preserve Gray's literary legacy and to shape public perception of the poet. Horace Walpole outlived Gray by more than 25 years, passing away on March 2, 1797, at the age of 79. His long life was filled with many friendships, but his connection with Thomas Gray, forged in their school days and enduring through quarrels and reconciliations, remained one of the most significant. It was a friendship rooted in shared youthful experiences and a lifelong passion for literature and learning. The fact that both men navigated their lives as unmarried individuals in a society where marriage was the norm perhaps added another layer to their understanding and reliance on such enduring male friendships. Their story is a testament to a bond that, despite its challenges, enriched both their lives and left a lasting mark on English literary history. Number 3. Henry James and Constance Fenimore Woolson, a transatlantic literary friendship's tragic death. Henry James, born on April 15, 1843, in New York City, became one of the most influential novelists in the English language, known for works like The Portrait of a Lady, The Wings of the Dove, and The Turn of the Screw. A master of psychological realism, James spent much of his adult life in Europe, eventually becoming a British citizen in 1915, a year before his death. He never married and is often described as a lifelong bachelor, his personal life remaining a subject of much speculation and scholarly inquiry. Constance Fenimore Woolson, born on March 5, 1840, in Claremont, New Hampshire, was a respected American novelist and short story writer, a grandniece of James Fenimore Cooper. She, too, never married and spent a significant portion of her career living and writing in Europe. Their paths first converged in Florence, Italy, in the spring of 1880. James was nearly 37, already an established literary figure. Woolson was 40, a successful writer in her own right, known for her depictions of American regions like the Great Lakes and the post-Civil War South. They were introduced by mutual friends in the American expatriate community. This meeting marked the beginning of a complex, deeply intellectual and emotionally resonant friendship that would last for 14 years, until Woolson's tragic death. From the outset, their connection was built on mutual literary admiration and shared experiences as American writers living abroad. Woolson had long admired James's work, and James in turn came to respect Woolson's talent and dedication to her craft. They found common ground in their observations of European society and their analyses of the American character, themes that permeated both their writings. Their correspondence became a vital space for discussing literature, their own works in progress, and the challenges of the writing life. James, in particular, was known for his unsheeple, if sometimes exacting, literary criticism, and Woolson valued his opinions. Over the years, they often found themselves living in proximity in various European cities, including Florence, Venice, and Rome. These periods allowed for more frequent personal interaction, dinners, walks, and long conversations. Woolson, who was partially deaf, often relied on James in social situations. He, in turn, seemed to appreciate her intelligence, her quiet devotion, and her understanding of his often solitary artistic temperament. Their friendship provided both with a crucial form of intellectual companionship in their expatriate lives. The exact nature of their emotional bond has been a subject of much discussion among biographers. Woolson's feelings for James appear to have been profound, possibly including romantic love, though this is not explicitly stated in their surviving correspondence, much of which James himself later destroyed. James's feelings were likely more complex, a mixture of genuine affection, intellectual esteem, and perhaps a certain emotional reticence characteristic of his personality. As two unmarried individuals dedicated to their literary careers, they shared a unique understanding of the sacrifices and solitudes that such a life could entail. One significant insight into their friendship is the way it reflected the nuanced social and emotional codes of the late 19th century, particularly within literary circles. Their letters, though often formal in tone by modern standards, hint at a deep undercurrent of mutual reliance and shared sensibility. James frequently offered Woolson advice on her writing and career, and she was a loyal and supportive presence in his life. For example, when James faced a period of professional disappointment after the commercial failure of his novels The Bostonians and The Princess Casamassima in the mid-1880s, Woolson's steadfast belief in his genius was a source of comfort. Woolson often arranged her living situations to be near James. For a time, she rented rooms in a villa in Garbo, near Florence, where James also resided. Later in England, she lived for a period in Oxford, partly to be closer to James when he was in London. This proximity sometimes seemed to make James uncomfortable, as he valued his independence and was perhaps wary of deeper emotional entanglements. Yet, he continued to seek out her company and engage with her intellectually. The friendship took a tragic turn in January 1894. Constance Fenimore Woolson, who had been suffering from periods of depression and ill health, possibly influenza, died after falling from a window of her apartment in Venice. She was 53 years old. The circumstances of her death, whether it was an accident or suicide, have remained a subject of debate, though many, including James, privately believed it to be suicide. James was profoundly affected by Woolson's death. He traveled to Venice immediately upon hearing the news to deal with her affairs, including her papers and personal effects. He was particularly concerned with their correspondence, and it is known that he destroyed many of her letters to him, and likely his to her that he could retrieve. This act, while perhaps intended to protect their privacy or his own emotional state, has left a void for biographers seeking to fully understand their relationship. He wrote to friends expressing his shock and grief, describing Woolson as a cherished friend and her death as a darkness. In the months and years following her death, James's actions revealed the depth of his connection to her. He wrote a poignant essay about her work, Miss Woolson, published in Harper's Weekly in February 1894, praising her talent and her dedication to her art. He also undertook a pilgrimage to her grave in the Protestant cemetery in Rome. Perhaps most significantly, her memory seemed to haunt him, and some scholars have traced echoes of Woolson and their friendship in several of his later works, most notably in the character of May Bartram in his 1903 novella, The Beast in the Jungle, a story about a man who fails to recognize the love offered to him until it is too late. The enduring friendship between Henry James and Constance Fenimore Woolson is a compelling story of intellectual partnership and complex emotional ties between two gifted writers who chose lives outside conventional marriage. Their shared experiences as American expatriates, their dedication to literature, and their mutual support formed the bedrock of a bond that, despite its tragic end and the lingering questions surrounding it, remained a significant influence in both their lives. James, the quintessential bachelor artist, found in Woolson a unique confidant and fellow traveler on the often lonely path of literary creation. Her presence and then her absence left an undeniable mark on his life and, arguably, his work. Number 2. Leonardo da Vinci and Francesco Malzi. a Renaissance master's devoted heir. Leonardo da Vinci, born on April 15, 1452, in Vinci, Italy, was the quintessential Renaissance man, a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, scientist, inventor, anatomist, geologist, cartographer, botanist, and writer. His genius was unparalleled, and his contributions to art and science were revolutionary. Leonardo never married and had no children. His life was dedicated to his art and his relentless pursuit of knowledge. Francesco Melzi, born around 1491 into a noble Milanese family, became Leonardo's pupil, companion, and ultimately his principal heir. Their remarkable friendship and working relationship began around 1506 or 1508, when Leonardo, then in his mid-50s, was living and working in Milan. Francesco Melzi, a young man of aristocratic background, likely in his mid-teens, joined Leonardo's household as an apprentice. Unlike some of Leonardo's other pupils who were primarily assistants for paintings, Melzi quickly became a devoted companion and a more personal student of Leonardo's multifaceted genius. Leonardo, who had a complex family background himself, being born out of wedlock, often formed close familial-like bonds with his young male apprentices. The bond between Leonardo and Melzi grew strong and endured for the remainder of Leonardo's life, a period of roughly 13 years. Melzi accompanied Leonardo on his travels, including his move to Rome in 1513 and finally to France in 1516, when Leonardo accepted the patronage of King Francis I. During these years, Melzi was not just a student, learning the art of painting. He was also Leonardo's secretary, managing his household affairs. Leonardo, in his later years, suffered from ill health, including a paralysis of his right hand, and Melzi's presence and assistance became indispensable. The depth of Leonardo's trust and affection for Melzi is most clearly demonstrated in his last will and testament. When Leonardo died on May 2, 1519, at the Clos Luz in Amboise, France, at the age of 67, he bequeathed the bulk of his artistic and scientific estate to Francesco Melzi. This included all his paintings that remained in his possession, his drawings, his tools, his personal effects, and, most crucially, his vast collection of manuscripts and notebooks. These notebooks, filled with Leonardo's observations, inventions, anatomical studies, and artistic theories, represented his life's work and intellectual legacy. This was an extraordinary act of trust. Leonardo, a man who never married and had no legitimate offspring to inherit his intellectual property, chose this young nobleman, then in his late 20s, to be the custodian of his most precious possessions. Melzi, who had been by Leonardo's side until the very end, took this responsibility with utmost seriousness. After Leonardo's death, Melzi returned to his family estate in Vaprio d'Adda, near Milan, bringing with him the entirety of Leonardo's artistic and scientific inheritance. For the next 50 years, until his own death around 1570, Francesco Melzi dedicated himself to preserving and organizing Leonardo's voluminous and often chaotic papers. This was a monumental task. Leonardo wrote in mirror script. His notes were often disorganized, and the sheer volume of material was immense, thousands of pages covering a bewildering array of subjects. Melzi meticulously sorted through these manuscripts, attempting to arrange them thematically. His efforts were crucial in ensuring the survival of these invaluable documents. It is largely thanks to Melzi's devotion that we have access to such a rich record of Leonardo's thought. One of Melzi's most significant contributions was his compilation of Leonardo's writings on painting into a more coherent form, which later became known as the Trattato della Pittura, or Treatise on Painting. Although the treatise was not published in its complete form until 1651, Melzi's work in organizing the source material was a vital first step. He also carefully guarded Leonardo's drawings and paintings. Melzi himself was a talented painter, trained by Leonardo, and he produced several works in a style heavily influenced by his master. However, his primary historical importance lies in his role as the faithful guardian of Leonardo's legacy. An insight into their relationship is how it transcended the typical master-apprentice dynamic of the Renaissance. While that was its origin, it evolved into a deep, personal bond akin to that of a father and son, or at least a mentor, and a deeply loyal protege. Leonardo, who had no conventional family structure of his own in his adult life, found in Melzi a steadfast and reliable companion. Melzi, in turn, dedicated a significant portion of his life to honoring his master's memory and work. His single status during the years of his close association with Leonardo, and for a period after Leonardo's death, allowed him the focus and dedication needed for this immense task. He did eventually marry and have children, but his formative years and early adulthood were dominated by his relationship with Leonardo and the subsequent stewardship of his legacy. The fact that Leonardo, a man of such immense intellect and foresight, chose Melzi for this critical role speaks volumes about Melzi's character, loyalty, and capabilities. Without Melzi's patient and diligent efforts, many of Leonardo's revolutionary ideas on anatomy, engineering, and art might have been lost or dispersed far more quickly. The notebooks, even after Melzi's death, were unfortunately later sold off and scattered, but his initial preservation efforts were fundamental. For example, the collection of anatomical drawings, now in the Royal Collection Trust in the United Kingdom, and the famous Codex Leicester, are part of the legacy Melzi safeguarded. The friendship between Leonardo da Vinci and Francesco Melzi is a poignant example of a bond built on mutual respect, affection, and a shared dedication to art and knowledge. It endured through Leonardo's final years, providing the aging master with companionship and essential support. For Melzi, it was a life-defining relationship that entrusted him with one of history's greatest intellectual treasures. As two individuals who, during the core period of their profound connection, were unencumbered by their own marital or direct family responsibilities, in the same way, their devotion to each other and to Leonardo's life's work was able to flourish, ensuring that the light of a Renaissance genius continued to shine for centuries to come. Melzi's nearly 50 years of curatorship of Leonardo's estate is a remarkable testament to this enduring loyalty. Number 1. Jane Austen and Cassandra Austen, a sisterly bond that shaped literary history. Jane Austen, born on December 16, 1775, in Steventon, Hampshire, England, is one of the most beloved and widely read novelists in English literature. Her novels, including Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, are celebrated for their wit, social commentary, and insightful portrayal of women's lives in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Jane Austen never married, dedicating her life to her writing and her family. Her closest confidant and lifelong companion was her older sister, Cassandra Elizabeth Austen, born on January 9, 1773. Cassandra, like Jane, also never married, though she was once engaged. The bond between Jane and Cassandra was exceptionally close, forged from their earliest years and lasting until Jane's premature death. They were the only two daughters among 8 children of George Austen, a clergyman, and Cassandra Lee Austen. Growing up in a lively and educated household, they shared a bedroom for many years, and this physical proximity mirrored their deep emotional and intellectual connection. Their lives were inextricably intertwined, a partnership of sisterly affection, mutual support, and shared experiences in a society where options for unmarried women were limited. Cassandra's own brush with romance ended tragically. She became engaged to Thomas Fowle in 1792. However, Fowle, a clergyman like their father, traveled to the Caribbean with a military expedition as a chaplain to earn money for their marriage. Sadly, he contracted yellow fever and died there in 1797. Cassandra was heartbroken and though she lived for nearly 5 more decades, she never formed another romantic attachment and chose to remain single. This shared status as unmarried women in a family and society that revolved around marriage undoubtedly strengthened the bond between Jane and Cassandra. They navigated their world together, relying on each other for companionship and understanding. Their correspondence was extensive and formed a vital part of their relationship, especially when they were separated by visits to friends or relatives. Jane's letters to Cassandra are a primary source of information about her daily life, her thoughts on society, her writing process, and her sharp observations of the people around her. These letters revealed Jane's characteristic wit and affection for her sister. She wrote to Cassandra with an openness and intimacy that she likely shared with no one else. Unfortunately, much of this intimate record is lost to us. After Jane's death, Cassandra, in an act that has been much debated by scholars, meticulously went through Jane's letters and destroyed a significant portion of them, burning many and cutting out passages from others. Her motive was likely to protect Jane's privacy and perhaps to curate her image for posterity, removing anything she felt was too personal, too critical, or potentially damaging to Jane's reputation or that of their family and acquaintances. While this act means a great deal of Jane's personal thoughts are lost, it also bucks Cassandra's deep involvement in Jane's life and legacy. Cassandra was Jane's first reader and most trusted critic. Jane would often read her manuscripts aloud to her family, but Cassandra's opinion held particular weight. It is believed that Cassandra's judgment and encouragement were crucial to Jane's development as a writer. Living in close quarters, they would have had countless conversations about Jane's plots, characters, and the social world she so brilliantly satirized. This constant intellectual companionship provided Jane with a supportive environment in which her literary genius could flourish. The sisters shared domestic responsibilities and managed their household affairs together, particularly after their father's death in 1805, when they, along with their mother, faced more constrained financial circumstances. They lived in various places, including Bath, Southampton, and finally Chawton Cottage in Hampshire, where Jane spent her most productive writing years. Chawton, provided by their brother Edward, offered them a stable and supportive home. Here, Cassandra took on many of the household management tasks, which in turn allowed Jane more time and space to concentrate on her writing. This practical support was invaluable. When Jane fell ill in 1816 with what is now believed to have been Addison's disease, Cassandra was her devoted nurse and companion. She accompanied Jane to Winchester in May 1817, seeking better medical care, and she was by Jane's side when she died there on July 18, 1817, at the age of 41. The grief Cassandra experienced was profound. She wrote a poignant letter to their niece Fanny Knight, describing Jane's final days and her own deep sorrow, stating, "I have lost a treasure, such a sister, such a friend as never can have been surpassed." Cassandra outlived Jane by nearly 28 years, passing away on March 22, 1845, at the age of 72. During these years, she remained the faithful guardian of Jane's memory and literary estate. She played a role in the posthumous publication of Northanger Abbey and Persuasion in late 1817. She also preserved Jane's unpublished manuscripts, including the unfinished novel Sanditon. Her actions, including the controversial burning of letters, significantly shaped the image of Jane Austen that was passed down to future generations, one of a gentle domestic authoress, perhaps smoothing over some of Jane's sharper edges or more private sentiments. An insight into their extraordinary friendship is how it provided a complete emotional and intellectual ecosystem for Jane, particularly as an unmarried female writer in a patriarchal era. Their sisterhood was not merely familial. It was a partnership that enabled Jane's literary career. Cassandra's unwavering support, practical assistance, and emotional understanding created a sanctuary for Jane's creative spirit. In a world where women's intellectual pursuits were often undervalued, Cassandra was a constant champion and confidant. Their shared single status meant they were primary companions for each other throughout their adult lives, their destinies intertwined in a way that transcended typical sibling relationships. The Austen sisterhood is a powerful example of how non-romantic, familial bonds between single individuals could be profoundly formative and historically significant, directly contributing to the creation of some of the world's most enduring literature. Cassandra's lifelong devotion, both during Jane's life and after her death, ensured that Jane Austen's voice would continue to resonate.